I have so much empathy for that experience, right? It's so much work. It's so hard to create a business that is
Yes.
profitable, viable for an exit. And it does take a tremendous exertion of our life force into making that thing. But then to reach this point where we do have these conversations with our loved ones where they're like, well, good, I'm proud of you, but it's also not really what I want from
Mhm.
you. I want your presence. I want your affection. I want your attention. I want to play alongside you. I want your availability. The money is great. It's helpful, but it's not the point. And the same thing I think happens in our inner worlds. Like we challenge ourselves to be able to make something out of
Mm.
nothing and craft something that provides a livelihood for us and often for others as well. Um, but it's easy to fuse the business with who we are. Um, and that's just extraordinarily dangerous,
Mm.
to have that much of your selfhood interwoven with something that will rise and fall with market trends
Mm.
or is going to leave us someday.
Dr. Sherry Walling, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the Inner Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Well, I first came across you on a podcast. I can't remember whose podcast it was, and you were talking about your book, Exit Strategy, the entrepreneur's guide to selling your business without regret. So I was listening to the episode, and I kind of was from the title. I was expecting something different. I was expecting a kind of nuts and bolts tools of the multiples and all, and that wasn't really the conversation. It was more about the I suppose the inner world of what might happen to you when you exit your business. And all of us entrepreneurs, at some stage, we plan to exit, and we really just think of what the number is, and we don't think of much else. And so, hey, that's why I thought you were a perfect fit for the podcast, because this podcast is the inner entrepreneur. And then I explored you a little bit more detail, and I got, oh my God, this isn't one conversation, this is a day. I discovered you're a clinical psychologist, an author, a podcaster, a speaker, a yoga teacher, an aerialist. You will have to explain what that is. And then recently, I've heard you speak on burnout, on grief. Obviously, I watched your YouTube presentation on that. And then I came across you only early in the week speaking about plant medicine and ayahuasca. So I thought, where do where do I start this conversation? So I have to hand it over to you. Uh, where did this all start for you, and how does it all pull together?
Oh, well, thank you for the question and the listing of all the things that I'm involved with. I don't watch a lot of TV, so
Okay,
I have some time to do all these other
yeah,
things.
you do have
Um,
children though, so I don't know where you get this.
I do have children. My children are a little older. They're 19 and 15, so they feed
Yeah,
themselves
yeah,
at this
yeah. You're not
point, which
changing
does
nappies.
again free up a little space.
Okay.
Yeah, my life has been in many ways this sort of mystery to me, so I'm not sure I can fully unpack it for you.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I've had really wonderful opportunities to just reflect and pivot and adjust to whatever challenges or circumstances I think were offered to me. So you mentioned the book Exit
Mm.
Strategy, and that's a collaboration with my husband, Rob Walling, who has sold and exited a couple of businesses. So the book has a lot of nuts and bolts,
Yeah,
but
yeah. So
my,
he has the real life experience of having done that
yeah,
successfully many times. Yeah, and you have I was going
yeah.
to say the soft side, but you have the clinical psychology understanding of the impact that many entrepreneurs wouldn't be aware of.
Yeah, we wrote that book because I kept interacting with so many entrepreneurs who were having really significant kind of existential crises around their exits.
No.
So we're experiencing depression, really disillusionment in their relationship, sometimes divorce, just like not doing
Mm.
well, which I think is surprising when you've worked your whole professional career to have an outcome that sometimes leaves you, fantastically more wealthy, at least on paper.
Yeah,
But then the inner world is in turmoil.
yeah,
So that's the through line really of all of my work is noticing these spaces where competent, creative, smart people are losing the through line. They're losing their sense of peace and well-being. And I care a lot about finding tools and ways to help people return to themselves, return to what they love, return to creativity, return to their core values, even in the midst of major disruption happening around them.
So it's interesting you talk about this idea of, you said on paper, that they have it all. You have this enormous exit, and you have this you have this wealth. Um, is it that way? And you've worked maybe for a long time towards that. Is it that when that happens, they suddenly realize that they had this misunderstanding, and they equated the money with fulfillment and happiness, and now it's the wake up call to go, well, it's actually probably very little to do with fulfillment and happiness and peace? Is it they have this aha moment and now they don't know what to do with it?
I think there is that question of I don't know what to do now. Depending on the age at which someone exits, they're going through this really significant transformation in their relationship to their vocation. And we think about that with a like traditional retirement, maybe. Although I could also argue that people who go the traditional retirement route are also not necessarily very mentally well. But vocation is a huge part of us, part of our identity, part of our passion, part of how we structure our days. And to bring that to a pinnacle of accomplishment and then lose it, like walk away from the business, be done with the business, tends to leave people really lost around, frankly, what to do with themselves day to day, but also around who they are and what matters to them. It is an existential crisis. Like, what is my existence? I have money now, and that's great. And many people, I think, feel a lot of gratitude about that success, but that doesn't answer the question of why. What am I doing here?
Yeah, it reminds me, and thankfully it was many, many decades ago, of coming home, and we had three small children at the time, and we had taken this month-long holiday, which was an extraordinary amount of time for me to take at the time, but it was over Christmas, and that's how I justified it. But I remember coming back and mentioning something to my wife about the amount of time I had taken off, almost like I'd done the family a favor. But and she said to me, her response was something to the effect that, yeah, but you brought your desk with you. And I obviously hadn't brought my desk with me, but I think what she said was my headspace was still to some degree on the business. I think I think I woke up from that 20 years ago, but that's what I see in so many founders and so many CEOs in particular, that there's maybe it's identity. They identify so much with their business, and they think, well, that's just going to be enough. But also, I think they expect people around them, maybe their partner, their family, to just acknowledge what the enormous contribution we're making to your life, and kind of, why isn't this enough? And they're realizing, well, I didn't want a check from you. I wanted your presence.
I wanted your presence. Yep. 100%.
So it is. I mean, I don't know. It just seems like a lot of entrepreneurs are missing that.
I have so much empathy for that experience, right? It's so much work. It's so hard to create a business that is profitable, viable for an exit. And it does take a tremendous exertion of our life force into making that thing. But then to reach this point where we do have these conversations with our loved ones where they're like, well, good, I'm proud of you, but it's also not really what I want from you. I want your presence. I want your affection. I want your attention. I want to play alongside you. I want your availability. The money is great. It's helpful, but it's not the point. And the same thing I think happens in our inner worlds. Like, we challenge ourselves to be able to make something out of nothing and craft something that provides a livelihood for us and often for others as well. But it's easy to fuse the business with who we are. And that's just extraordinarily dangerous, to have that much of your selfhood interwoven with something that will rise and fall with market trends or is going to leave us someday.
I had a conversation yesterday with a business owner, and he spoke about. I have to be careful to say about this because I don't want to give away the individual. But he spoke with traveling to meet this very successful business owner who in Ireland is a household name. Visit him on his. Visit him, let's say where he resides now. I just don't want people to identify him. And this man is now in his late 80s, and said like he lives in such extraordinary opulence, but he lives alone, and the only people surrounding him are his staff, and he's not particularly pleasant to them, and he just seems like this sort of a lonely individual. And it was just shocking to him that this man whose name is a household name that we all revere as this icon of success, and this is how he's passing his latter years. And one would wonder the regrets he has.
I mean, I think that's often true. Not to, I don't have the maybe data to back this up perfectly, but I think those people who reach such success that they are a household name, they're such outliers in their experience in the world, in their capacity, in their drivenness, that they are often really operating on a completely sort of different field of existence than the people around them. And so that makes it almost impossible for them to have non-exchange oriented relationships. And it makes it very, very difficult for them to have peers and people who are capable of bantering with them or pushing back. And so I think there's a tremendous amount of loneliness among those people who are at the upper edge of the normal curve, so to speak, in terms of success or even like cognitive functioning. They're outliers and we revere them, but that often comes with a deep shadow, with some sort of deep suffering.
I'm wondering, have you worked with anyone at that level? And is there a means for them to address and acknowledge that shadow and maybe redress some of the mistakes they've made?
Yeah, I think by the time people get to me, they're pretty aware of it. Yeah. I haven't necessarily worked with billionaires, but I've worked with a lot of millionaires, and there's a lot of loneliness among high achieving people. And I think the way to work through that, of course, is not going to be surprising, but it's to find ways to be of service, to find ways to connect outside of work or outside of financial achievement, to play, to be creative, to be involved with music, to be involved with philanthropy. These are the things that we anchor to others with our hearts, not just with our intellectual capacity or our business savvy. And it's that heart-to-heart connection that we allow ourselves to have with others that keeps us from being lonely in our 80s, or keeps us from being really isolated, from being known.
You talked about connecting with the heart. I mean, that's powerful, but is it fair to say for a lot of people that's scary? Particularly,
For
yeah.
sure. It's the scariest thing in the
good. So it's
world.
not just me.
Particularly for
Yeah, thanks.
I mean, the entrepreneurial archetype is very controlled,
Yes.
calculating, strategic, intellectual. These are dialed in people. So this idea of vulnerability and opening oneself up to be seen and not loved, or seen and hurt. Yeah, that's some superpower level of courage and risk. And it's very hard.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Almost, and that's why there are difficult, the more successful you are, the more difficult it is.
Okay. Is that by default or is that learned behavior?
I mean, it's almost always a combination of the two. The interaction between someone's sort of capability coming into this life and what happens in their life that reinforces certain parts of them versus other parts of them.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I've given the example of a billionaire, and it's very easy in these conversations to go to the extremes. But the reality of it is, I know there will be business owners, entrepreneurs driving in their car when they listen to this podcast, who fall into the, well, what's that expression, everyday millionaire. I mean, they're they're successful people, but they're not extraordinarily successful that they're all over the headlines. Um, the drive, but still, I think the behavior is very much the same in that you're working very hard in your business, you're focused very hard in your business. I don't want this to sound sexist, but I think as a man, what we do, because it's what I did until I was corrected, is I kind of delegated the family to my wife. I mean,
Hmm.
it's like you look after the family, you look after the house, you do all that, and
I'll pay the bills.
and I'll pay the bills. And somehow we feel that is a reasonable exchange. Thankfully, I had a wife that corrected me in a few points. I'm probably very
Gave you some
yeah,
pushback.
I'm probably very fortunate, yeah, in that in that in that case. Maybe that's how I'm still married 35 years later. But um, what do we need to do differently?
I think we need to tell the truth about being full people. We're people who live in a body. So part of our health and well being is how we tend and take care of our bodies. We're people that have emotions, relationships, like the heart aspects of us. And then we're also curious, driven, creative, like, let's see what we can make, let's see what's possible. So these different aspects of ourselves need airtime. And I think when people are out of balance or when people are not well or sort of struggling from a mental health perspective, it's because they are over attending to one dimension of themselves and ignoring the other dimensions. And yeah, that's what I would say about like bring your full self forward, pay attention to all of the parts of you.
I remember, again, I'm going back a very, very long time, when I came to a point of burning out. What was shocking to me, and I remember going to my doctor thinking there was something seriously wrong with me, and he checks me out and goes, "You're perfectly healthy." I go, "Well, how is that?" And he said to me, "Do you think you might be stressed?" What was shocking to me at the time was the most shocking thing was, firstly, that was obvious. I was very stressed. The second thing is that I was unaware. Now, I mean, if you been within 10 feet of me, it would have been obvious to any other human being. But to me, that I was going, well, yes, and how come I haven't? I mean, this has been going on probably now for, maybe it'd been a 2 year buildup or whatever to, you know, to, but that was shocking to me, that I was unaware of it. I think I was unaware of it until it was pointed out to me. I was unaware of it until I pretty much hit a brick wall. And that concerns me a little bit. It brought a huge amount of awareness to me, but it concerns me to people, because I'm also imagining someone listening to this going, "Yeah, I hear you, but I'm not stressed. I'm not heading to burnout. My relationships are great." How do we how do we navigate that, and how do we measure? Was that just me, or do you see this?
Yeah. There's this term within psychological and I guess biological research called habituation, which is that we habitize or become in the habit of things that we do frequently. So, when we are stressed often, we habituate to stress so much so that we don't feel it. We don't notice it as any
Hmm.
different than any other condition in our day. And that, of course, is really quite dangerous to our bodies and minds and relationships. This idea of chronic stress that just becomes kind of downloaded in us such that it's part of us. And so the way to not habituate to any level of stress, which would lead us then to burnout, is to have enough like variety in the things that we care about and in the ways that we are using our minds and our time and our bodies. So I guess I think about burnout specifically as a repetitive stress injury. Like if you're doing the same things over and over with your brain, you will get burnt out. And you won't notice because you will get so used to it. That's the habituation problem. But if you are varying what you care about and how you spend your time, then you'll have enough diversity in how you are using your neurological capacity that you won't exhaust those same neurons quite so much. And the same is true of stress. Like if you are someone who regularly takes good vacations or has hobbies that you invest in, has rich relationships with people outside of your industry or outside of your professional entrepreneur communities, you will begin to notice the difference between the chronically stressed entrepreneur experience and what it feels like to sit on the beach in Bali or what it feels like to laugh with your friends at the pub. We have to do enough things that get us out of that same way of being, those same systems of operation, that we notice when we're getting stuck.
That makes a whole lot of sense, and I agree entirely. And my kickback is, but when you're in the early stages of building a business, most of us have put an extraordinary level of, because building a business is not easy, and they tell us that 95% of, new businesses fail. So it's not easy, and in the early years particularly, it requires a huge amount of effort. And even as the years go on, when the business is acquires, it requires a huge amount of effort, and that's where the balance maybe becomes a difficult thing to attain.
I know this and I hear this a lot, but I also sometimes think that we like it when it's hard. We like to feel like the hero in the hero's journey, walking through the treacherous, like scary valley full of monsters. And I do not mean to demean the amount of effort and energy that it takes, because this is what I do. This is who I work with. I've seen it firsthand. I also run my own business. But I do want to push back on the normalization of this as hard. It's quite possible to build a great business without killing yourself, without being in burnout, without working 70 hours a week. And I think we have to be really careful about, again, this sort of psychological norming around it's so hard, you're going to fail. Like, maybe it's not. Maybe you just decide to do it with ease and grace and balance and staying in touch with yourself. And you operate from that place, and then you see how the business unfolds.
I also think this description of hard comes from this entrepreneurial mindset that says it's all me, it depends on me, it needs me, it won't go right without me. So I think that I come across this if the business to succeed, I need to be doing all of these things, and that's in most cases a delusion.
And I do like to push back with my clients with a very loving and gentle, like, stop being so freaking egotistical. Like, you are not the center of the world. And if you are building a business that is based around you being the center, you are not building a sustainable business. You're not building a healthy business. You're sure not building a business that can be sold. So don't do it like that. Like, be savvy to your own bullshit, if I'm allowed to say this on your show. It's important that I think entrepreneurs are self-reflective, and also probably in some kind of therapeutic or coaching relationship where, or a mastermind, or, some kind of relationships where people can, again, gently sort of point out, hey, do you see how you're doing it? Do you see your resistance to delegation? Do you see your need to, interpose yourself really in every aspect of the business, and that's problematic for you and for the business.
It is, and I think it's very challenging for most entrepreneurs to have the self-awareness to look at that, and to acknowledge and to realize there are enormously capable people around you. I think sometimes the reason why we don't find enormously capable people is because we don't allow them to be enormously capable people, and therefore those capable people won't stay working for us unless we give them the freedom to be who they are and do what they're going to do.
But that does require us to have a level of humility, that
How
I
much humility do
honestly
you
is
find? Yeah,
difficult right alongside the entrepreneur. Like the challenge of an entrepreneur is to say, I believe that I'm capable of succeeding where no one else has, and that I'm going to speak into existence something that doesn't exist despite all odds and generate something from nothing. I mean, they're magic
yeah.
makers, which is I love working with entrepreneurs. But we also have to like temper the wizardry a little bit and remind people that they are still very human and that there are great gifts in being human, which means being able to work alongside with other humans. So celebrating the part of an entrepreneur that's like, I'm the one who can pull this off. And also balancing that with like, you don't always want the pressure of being that special. So it's okay to come back to earth and let people help you and let people enact your dream alongside you. That's one of the best ways for the dream, for the business to be successful is to convert recruits who are on the team and sold and, in, so to doing some of the work with you.
I think it's not only the acknowledgement of the fact that there are capable people around you and it's not all you, but I think it's the realization that that whatever talent you have, and you may be enormously talented, but in business there are lots of skills needed, and no one person ever has those skills. And from my own experience, it took me making a number of stupid decisions that cost me a lot of money to realize I need other people in the room who can see what I can't see, and are willing to give me that feedback. But I think I think you have to become the person professionally and personally that's open to that feedback.
Yeah. Yep.
What attracts you particularly to work with entrepreneurs? I mean, when you started as a psychologist, did you go straight into that, or?
No, I started working mostly with people in the military, and then physicians, first responders. So people who had really high intensity jobs. The first part of my career was really focused on helping people with post-traumatic stress disorder and other trauma-related challenges. But I really liked this intersection of folks who were experiencing trauma at work, because this idea of people's relationship with their vocation is very interesting to me. And the way that I make the pivot to entrepreneurs is my husband is an entrepreneur, as I mentioned, and I came home one day. Rob has degrees in computer engineering and electrical engineering. I mean, he's like an engineer's engineer, software guy. And I came home and found him crying in his office. And of course, I was concerned. And so asked him what was happening. And he let me know that Aaron Schwartz had died by suicide. And I said, that is very sad, but who is Aaron Schwartz? Like, it wasn't someone we knew personally. But Aaron, of course, was one of the co-founders of Reddit and was just a bright, young, technical mind. And I think Rob saw a lot of himself in Aaron, in Aaron's capacity to really focus on. So I think that moment became really pivotal, actually, in my life, because I care so much about these brilliant creative minds. And of course, brilliant creative minds are often flirting with unwell. Yeah. They're right on the edge of the normal curve, right? They're functioning differently. They see differently. And with that comes all of this isolation and differential, like sort of neurodivergence that can be quite dangerous to people. So I, shortly after Aaron died, started giving talks about mental health in entrepreneur circles, mostly to tech folks. And that topic became interesting, and people really responded to my work. I wrote a book called The Entrepreneur's Guide to Keeping Your Shit Together to help sort of give people tools related to mental health. And that was sort of the beginning of the story. And now that's all that I do. That's my primary focus. It's been so for about 10 years.
Can you maybe talk us through some of those tools that will help us keep our shit together?
Yeah, they are. Some of my favorite tools are probably not so groundbreaking, but they're just the reinforcement of Yeah, doing them. Things like journaling, really paying attention to what's life-giving in a day and what's draining energy from you in a day. That simple reflective practice is taken from like an Ignatian spirituality practice of just reflecting on where is life and where is
Mm.
drain. But really helps entrepreneurs hone like what are the parts of my work or my relationship with my business that are giving energy and what's taking energy. And of course, the things that take energy should probably be delegated or not continued. But it's a simple tool that is self-reflection. A gratitude
And I
practice,
just
of
ask
course,
you a little
is
about journaling because
sure.
something comes to mind. Uh, I, I love journaling, and I've used it in two ways. One is in straightforward journaling, but also at one stage of under a lot of stress, I used to do this thing called free writing. I can't remember the book I came across, where you
Hmm.
literally are just dumping all your
Morning pages
you're dumping
sometimes.
everything. I used to dump it onto pages that I would say stuff that I did not want anyone to read. So it would
Yeah.
literally be a scribble, and I would dump those pages afterwards. And I also do more. I haven't done that in a long time. I do a more civilized version of journaling now, but I'm not consistent with it, and I tend to use it as a tool when I want to clear stuff. And I'm wondering what you think. Is it something? Is it a habit that would be useful for someone to have part of every day, or is it a band-aid you take out when you feel you need to clear something from your mind?
Yeah. I think one of the practices that you're talking about is sometimes called morning pages, and it's from a book called The
The
Artist's
artist way,
Way,
it's exactly. I think it might even be in the shelf
which
there.
is
Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
it's a wonderful
In a time
practice.
of particular overwhelm. It's again, it's decades ago, and a friend of mine gave me this, and I found this practice that was just it was literally like a dump. I could get into the page, and whatever's going on in my head, you would do this for 10, 15 minutes, and there would be nothing left to write, but you would have just it really was therapeutic.
Yeah, the prompt is like, do not pick up your
Yes.
pen, do not
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah.
Write for whatever, you set your time 20 minutes. And do not filter or think or plan any of what you write. Just let
Which
yourself
is why
write.
I used to scribble, because I would write stuff down going, if someone finds that I think this, it's like, I don't want anyone to know I think this. And so I would literally write it in a way that, I mean, I couldn't even
Couldn't be
reread it,
read.
but it didn't seem to make any difference. I mean,
Yeah.
it was dumped out onto the page and it was done and gone.
I think journaling is a little bit like going to the psychological gym. Like it's very good to do it
Yeah. Yeah.
regularly. But if you haven't done it in a while, it's still really good to
Yeah.
start. And if you're working on a particular health crisis or you have an injury, then it becomes all the more important to use as a tool. It is a fantastic way of just clearing thoughts. And it is almost like having a conversation with oneself. When we put things down on paper, we're getting them out of our inner world and seeing them in a bit of a neutral, separate stance, which just helps us see ourselves differently.
Yeah. And I think in doing that, maybe we get to see ourselves before we hit the crisis. Because the interesting thing to me, and I don't know about your story, but I interview a lot of people on this podcast who have written books and have wonderful teachings, and there always is an origin story of the tremendous crisis in their life when they went,
Hmm.
I need to do something different. And so I've seen that in 100% of cases. Um, I've yet to come across the person who goes, I was living blissfully happy and my life was full of joy, but I had this inspiration. I'm sure they're out there. Please call me. I haven't met them. And therefore, I wonder if there's, I hope to some degree that we can learn so that people don't have to hit, do you know what I mean? So they can learn before they get to the
Yeah.
crisis. I don't know. You're the doctor. Maybe I'm
I think,
delusional.
I think crisis will come.
Either way.
It's just part of the nature of what it means to be
Yeah.
human. Like, we are going to lose people we
Yeah.
love. We are going to experience injury or illness in our bodies. Like, we will have plans and ideas that don't work out. Like, that's just part of life.
Yeah.
Like, doing this thing called
It's
aliveness.
unavoidable.
So we don't need to fear it. We don't need to even have attachment to it not happening. I think we just have to equip ourselves to respond as well as we can when it does, and hopefully try to minimize our risk for crises of our own making. Like, we don't have to go looking for it. It will happen at some point or another. But something like journaling, though, can help you find your voice in the midst of changing conditions, which I think is really helpful.
Okay. So journaling, what next?
A gratitude practice. Yeah, this is another kind of tool that's pulled from perhaps a spiritual tradition, but has a huge pile of research to support it as something that helps with mental health and emotional well-being. So this simple listing of 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for at some point during your day can help you reorient the filter of your mind towards all that is well instead of all that is undone, incomplete, broken, frustrating, painful, problematic. And it's not meant to ignore or cover over all of those things, but it is just meant to counterbalance the filter of our brains. Because of our kind of evolutionary adaptation to things that threaten us, we are much more attuned to negativity, to threat, to negative feedback, to negative thoughts than we are to the positive versions of those things. Negative poses a threat, so we want to pay extra attention to something that might be poisonous or dangerous or likely to lash out and hurt us. But as a result, in our modern world, we're sort of operating as if we're hyper attuned to threats that don't actually pose risk to life and limb. So we have to really actively counterbalance that. And gratitude is a really good way to help the filter in our thinking from getting too stuck on negativity or threat-oriented thoughts.
So we kind of have a natural lean towards negativity because of our evolution, because it kept us safe. So we have to counterbalance that by redirecting or retraining our brains to pay attention to I suppose to some degree, you always find what you're looking for. And if any of us look for our lives, you can find things to be enormously grateful for and things that are enormously difficult.
Yeah. But gratitude is, I think, a good one because it's not an ego statement. It's not like, I'm so smart, I'm so capable, and it's not about our accomplishments or achievement. My business is growing at this rate. My employees are this happy. It's not about anything that is sort of tied to our performance or our ego. It's a more neutral stance of, I am grateful for my health. I am grateful for my children. I am grateful for the sunshine today. And those kind of, again, sort of move us from the center of the story in a pretty healthy way.
Yeah, and I suppose when you look at how attached if we're building a business or whatever, but we all do, how attached we become to our success and what we're doing, and we build our identity around that. And sometimes then we can take our partners, our children, our friends for granted. And in this practice, we get to zone back in. Remember, that's actually what's most important to me in life.
Yeah.
I was really surprised a couple of days ago to listen to you on a podcast and hear you talking about ayahuasca. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about it. I was surprised to be involved in an entrepreneurial conversation. And it interested me is that I had an ayahuasca experience during the summer. It was about 8 of us did it. And three of those people, myself included, were part of an entrepreneurs group I'm involved in. But I thought it was a bit unusual. So two reactions I got when I spoke to people about it. One was a lot of people had never heard of it. They didn't know anything about plant medicine. A lot of people had never heard of it. The people who had heard of ayahuasca thought it was crazy. I was just doing drugs. And I was trying to explain something different. So I explained it poorly. So I think a lot of people listening will go, what's this ayahuasca stuff? Can you talk a little bit about plant medicine and ayahuasca and how you feel it serves us?
Sure. This is a big conversation, but I'll do my best to be succinct. I'll give you a little background. A few things happened in my life that made me very interested in plant medicines. One is, as I mentioned, I came up in my career focused on post-traumatic stress disorder. And we have a number of therapy, like talk-based therapies, and then traditional psychotropic medication therapies to help people with PTSD. But there's a lot of challenge in really helping people feel differently, mostly related to how the trauma settles in their bodies. So I was sort of curious as a clinician around how to get in to people's cells and help to reset some of the ways that they were seeing and holding the trauma. So there's been a real significant uptick in resurgence of research, really specifically focused on PTSD, using a medicine called MDMA, which people may know as the street drug ecstasy, also called Molly. And it is very widely researched as a potential solution or a potential tool to help with PTSD because of the way that it temporarily impairs the functioning of the amygdala, and then which is the fear-based center of the brain, but then also floods the body with serotonin and oxytocin, and really creates this sort of neurological conditions that are ripe for someone to therapeutically work on traumatic experiences in the absence of fear, which is radical in the PTSD world. PTSD is a fear-related illness or fear-related damage. So I was, again, sort of professionally very interested in that work. And then in my personal life, I lost my dad to esophageal cancer, and I lost my brother to suicide within 6 months of each other. So I had my own very deep dive crisis of grief and loss. And I was really looking for things that could support my own healing. And so plant medicines became something that I was really interested in because of my clinical background. And there are a variety of things that sort of fall in this category of psychedelics. MDMA is a synthetic, LSD is a synthetic, meaning it's made in a laboratory. Plant medicines, which are naturally occurring, are things like psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in psychoactive mushrooms, and then ayahuasca, which is a combination of two plants, an ayahuasca vine and a chacruna, which is a leaf. So these plant medicines have been used all over, well, in specific places in the world. There are many other medicines that fall in this category. I don't have time to go into all of them, but they have been used historically by the medicine men and medicine women in a traditional culture. They are also used in rites of passage. They're used for healing. So there's a lot of human knowledge and experience of plant medicines that haven't quite made it into the modern zeitgeist until now. And there are actually a lot of entrepreneurs who are quite interested in psychedelics and plant medicines because of their uses for both healing but also expansion. So, of course, LSD is famous for its capacity to inspire songs and artists and music, and to see differently and think differently and see into what's possible. So again, a lot of entrepreneurs are quite interested in these consciousness expansion practices to help them to be better able to be creative and to function at high levels.
It's interesting that you talked about the plant medicine helping people who've experienced trauma and to enable them to deal with the trauma or look at the trauma, remove the fear. So is it that when that you remove the fear and for a moment you can just look at what the traumatized experience is without the fear? Does that allow you to experience it differently or learn a different lesson, or what's happening there?
Yeah. One example that I have shared in some of my writing is I was able to use MDMA therapy shortly after my dad died. And when I was with my dad when he died, I was in bed with him, kind of ushering him over the gate, as they say, across the threshold. And when that was actually happening, I was very aware of his pain and his comfort. I was very aware of my mother and my siblings, and I'm the oldest daughter, and I'm a psychologist, so I have
Yeah.
a lot of like caretaking kind of responsibility in my family. In the context of the MDMA therapeutic session, I kind of returned to that scene exactly as it had literally happened. But instead of being really attuned to what everyone else was experiencing and being concerned for their well-being, I almost was sort of like hovering above and seeing myself as a daughter who was losing her daddy,
Yeah.
with just such tenderness and empathy for
Yourself.
myself, for my own little
Your,
girlness
your
almost.
grief. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that really, it softened my experience of losing him and replaced it with like obligation and caretaking, and I have to check on everybody and make sure everybody's okay, to me really just being tenderly, lovingly present to my own experience. And it's a small example, but that's a little bit of what happens with that particular kind of therapy. That it doesn't rewrite history. You're not adding in new characters or colors. It's not, covering over any of the reality or the difficulty of what's happened to you, but it is allowing you to see it with a slightly different perspective or new eyes, because in the place of fear and anxiety, you are infused with empathy and tenderness, which is often what's needed for us to feel better about these painful experiences in our lives.
And sometimes I suppose it allows us to actually experience those painful experiences, and by experiencing them fully, we allow ourselves to grieve and to heal over time. And I wonder sometimes, is it just we just don't allow ourselves to feel, and therefore it's never processed. It's stuck in our body forever because we haven't actually allowed ourselves to process it.
I can't tell you how many people who've experienced trauma that I've talked to who have said something to the effect of like, if I start crying, I'm never going to
Yeah.
stop. Or maybe especially men, there's a sense of like, I can't break down that way,
Right.
because again, once I begin, I don't know if I can put it back
Mm.
together. Um, and so I think there we have this level of resistance or fear of feeling, because of what we think it might mean about our ability to come back and drive the carpool and get to work on a Tuesday.
Yeah, because even when these situations happen in our life, we still mostly have responsibilities, and we have responsibilities for ourselves.
Yeah.
We have responsibilities for other people. I remember, I mean, I've lost my own mother many years ago, but uh, my wife's mother died when my wife was 18, so it was very shocking to the family. And I was deeply connected with the family at the time. So as a young man at 18 years of age and inexperienced, what kind of surprised me most was that I was like, I'm talking about months after she passed, and she passed very suddenly. Months after, maybe even years after, I was still aware of the grief in the family. I was still aware of it, but we
Mm-hmm.
would enter into the world, and the world had moved on. And that was the kind of surprising part of it, is that people are tender with you for weeks or months, and then life moves on. So maybe we feel like, well, I have to put this in a box, and I don't get to deal with it. Maybe that's what's going on.
Yeah.
The some of the reaction I got from the ayahuasca was that people were terrified of it.
It's a very powerful
Very.
medicine. I think it's wise to approach that medicine with a lot of fear. It's interesting to say, though, when people are like, oh, you're just going to do drugs. I mean, ayahuasca is a very difficult medicine for
Mm.
some. It involves a lot of purging, which can look like vomiting in buckets and, other things that we don't need to go into a lot of detail. But it's not fun, really. It can be very rewarding and meaningful, but it is a very thorough self assessment and sort of clearing from yourself aspects of your life, body that are problematic or not meaningful. So it's a little bit like standing in front of a surgeon and they're just like chopping out the bits
Yeah.
that aren't useful. It's important and it's useful and it's powerful, but not pleasant. And it definitely feels like
Yeah.
medicine,
Absolutely.
not drugs.
Well, we've come a kind of full circle from talking about exiting your business with lots of money
Yeah.
to digging into the depths of your soul with the process of ayahuasca. And so it's been a wonderful conversation. Where can people find you? Where can they learn more about what you do, find your books, etc.?
Yeah. I have a few different places that I live on the internet. My company is called zenfounder.com, and we provide all kinds of mental health and well-being resources to entrepreneurs, including books and podcasts and things like that. I also have a life as an aerialist, which I mentioned
You're
briefly,
going to have
but
to tell us
I'm a
what an
circus
aerialist is. Yeah.
performer. And I work with the trapeze and aerial silks. Part of my way of working through my own grief, in addition to plant medicine, has been to really double down on movement and creative movement as a practice. So if you are interested in what that looks like, that work is at touchingtwoworlds.com, which is also the name of the book that I wrote about grief. But I'm also on Instagram and, other LinkedIn, other social media outlets, and at Dr. Sherry Walling.
Wonderful. Well, we will stick all of these in the show notes, and I encourage people to look you up, learn about you, and there's certainly a lot to explore. Dr. Sherry Walling, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me.